Hey y'all, I'm Lauren and welcome to Cantina Cast. Today I'm wrapping up my coverage of the Phase 2 High Republic comic written by Cavan Scott. So this comic, it was 10 issues long. I've been going through and covering each issue in chunks, kind of as the story arc is arranged. And so today I'm going to be covering issues 8 through 10, which is going to be wrapping up this comic series. Overall, I mean, I've said it in my previous videos on this series, I have really enjoyed this. I love it how Cavan Scott wrote this series to be very closely tied with Path of Vengeance. They're so closely tied that I feel like if you read Path of Vengeance without reading this series, you are missing some details that I feel like really like round out the story, and also vice versa. These two works are really meant to be both read together. So I just want to reemphasize, as I have in my previous videos on this series, if you haven't read Path of Vengeance, that's definitely going to be a must read if you like this series. And then also, if you like Path of Vengeance, this comic series is going to be a must read as well. And with the whole tie-in with Path of Vengeance aside, I have really gotten a lot of enjoyment out of this series because I love the characters that we're following in it. Especially Tay Sirek, he's my favorite, and I really like Vildar Mack as well. They're kind of like the two standout characters for me, but there's other great characters in this series too that we got to know over the course of the series, and we also got to know more in Path of Vengeance as well. So definitely check this one out if you haven't yet, especially if you're interested in Phase 2 of the High Republic. This has been like one of the highlights of Phase 2 for me. I do recommend, if you're new to reading this comic series, I recommend checking out my previous videos with my series coverage that I've been doing up until this point, which I'll link in the description below, just because I feel like some of this probably isn't going to make sense if you're reading the comic series out of order. And from this point on in the video, I will be talking about spoilers. I'm going to go through and discuss the plot of each issue and kind of do like a little recap and also give my thoughts as I'm going through it as well. So if you haven't read the series yet, or if you're not caught up, beware of spoilers after this point. So picking up with issue 8, which is called Dunes of Blood. It's picking up right where we left off in issue 7, which is issue 7 ended with that big cliffhanger of Olivia has been stabbed, and Vildar Mack, Maddie, and Tay Sirek, they're all at the bar Enlightenment with the wounded people that have been caught in the middle of the riot on Jeddah. And so when we pick back up in issue 8, we do see that Olivia is still alive. She's barely hanging on, and she's calling for help. And so back in Enlightenment, the person that she called for help is Vildar Mack. And so back in Enlightenment, Vildar, Maddie, and Tay, and Creighton, who is the owner slash bartender at Enlightenment, they're all trying to figure out what they're going to do. And as that conversation is being had, they realize that Tay has actually disappeared. And this is a surprise because they were like, oh, I thought that this bar was like totally sealed. Like, how could he have just left? But it turns out that Creighton admits to them after the secret is kind of spilled by one of the bouncers of the bar. But it turns out that the way that Tay got out of the bar is that there is like a secret passageway that they used for smuggling like back in the day. Tay's scout droid Scoot found the secret passageway and helped Tay figure out how to get out of the bar. And Tay is very much about like wanting to go help people, so it's not really a huge surprise that he didn't want to stick around at Enlightenment when, you know, there's more trouble going on out there. And so the droid Scoot is leading Tay through these underground tunnels, and in the underground tunnels are these like giant alien rat creatures called Dune Scratchers. They are aggressive, and so they're chasing Tay down, and Tay ends up having to use his power that we saw back at the beginning of this series, which is something that his species has, kind of like a defense mechanism, where he releases a type of pheromone like into the air, which causes any sort of predatory creature that might be like chasing after him, it causes their heart to stop. Tay uses this power on the Dune Scratchers to be able to get away from them. But there's so many of them that he is kind of having some trouble getting a handle on the situation. And thankfully Vildar shows up at the nick of time, because Vildar, when they all uncovered this secret passageway that Creighton didn't want to tell them about back in Enlightenment, when Vildar uncovered that, he ended up wanting to go and help Tay. So Vildar shows up and saves him from the giant dune scratchers. But Vildar, he does seem to have an affinity with animals because he is able to use the Force to talk to the dune scratchers and gets them to actually leave and leave them alone. So he doesn't have to actually hurt them. He's able to just talk them out of bugging them. And as Tay and Vildar are sitting there talking, Vildar is asking him, why is it that you left? And because everybody at Enlightenment thinks that you're just going because you want to go after the treasure that's inside the Jedi statue that we found out about in previous issues. And it turns out, I mean, us as the reader, we kind of already, we know Tay by this point, like we know him well enough to know that his objective in leaving the bar and going to the statue is to try to help Olivia. And even though he's the type of character that, like, sometimes you don't really know what he's gonna do, you can tell what his motives are. His motives of helping people are very clear. And that's one thing I really like about this character. He's a little unpredictable, but you know where his heart's at, even in all of that unpredictableness. And while they're having this conversation as well, we do see that some of the other people that were waiting back at Enlightenment, they actually followed Vildar here. And so Maddie's there along with some of the other people that were back in the bar. And while they're deciding what they're going to do and they're talking about the situation, part of the tunnel collapses, which is that's something that Creighton was afraid of happening because it's just not a structurally sound tunnel. And so Maddie and the others, they end up having to turn back. There's no choice because the collapse was like so much rubble that it's beyond their ability to be able to lift the rubble. So they just have no choice but to go. So it's just only going to be Vildar and Tay that are going to help Olivia now. And Vildar tells Maddie, he's like, you know, it's probably for the best because Creighton, who stayed back at the bar, he's not going to be able to hold it on his own. So y'all should go back. This happened for a reason, so let's just make the best of it. And when Vildar and Tay come out the other side of the tunnel, they find that Olivia is still miraculously alive. She's like barely holding on though. And she told them that she was trying to put herself into a healing trance, but she's in so much pain that she wasn't able to manage it. Vildar and Tay, they're talking about what they're gonna do, and the best thing that they come up with is for Tay to use his pheromone that he has to stop people's heart and to actually, instead of completely stopping her heart, to like put her to sleep. And Tay tells Vildar this is a risk. She's weak. Like I don't know if this is actually gonna work, but thankfully it does work, and because it's really like their only option because there's nothing else that they can do for her, and they can't like immediately take her away because they need to go find Master Liban. So that's really the only option, and thank God it works. But right after they do this, Vildar is feeling the presence of the leveler pretty strongly. Like there's a panel in the comic when he looks over at Tay, and Tay is like, he appears to be like a messed up creature because Vildar is hallucinating because the leveler is nearby. Then when Vildar and Tay, they're looking for Master Liban and they're trying to learn what the significance of everything happening at the statue is. At one point, Vildar touches the stone. He's trying to use his psychometry abilities to get some more information about this. But when he's doing that, they actually overhear some path members that are still at the statue. And we see that the Herald is there with Yana Rowe, and they now have both of the rods. They have the Rod of Daybreak and the Rod of Seasons. And of course, we know that these two rods, when they're connected, they can fully control the leveler. When they see this, they realize that their theory of the riot being started meant as a distraction, their theory is confirmed because the Herald started this riot so that way he could go and locate both of the rods, and Yana is helping him do that. And this little detail, this is like one of those many details that does tie directly into Path of Vengeance. So if you've read Path of Vengeance already, then the rod being in Yana and the Herald's possession, that probably is going to connect some dots for you to know that, because that situation, it does later on play a part in Path of Vengeance. But somehow Vildar and Tay, they're watching all of this like from a distance, and I don't know how the path members don't see them, but somehow they don't. And what they see when they're watching this is the Herald connect the two rods together, and also command the leveler to eat Master Liban. So Master Liban has now been killed by the leveler. And so the very last image in issue 8 is this image of the leveler pouncing on Master Liban. Then at the beginning of issue 9, which is called The Hand of Siberius, we pick back up, we're right where we left off, where it's the leveler, Yana, and the Herald. They are in the secret Jedi vault within the statue, and Master Liban is being attacked by the leveler. And while this is happening, Tay and Vildar, they are witnessing all of this, and Tay is like, Vildar, we got to do something. But Vildar is so beside himself because he's in the presence of the leveler that he's really no help at all. And Tay doesn't really understand, like, fully, like, the state that Vildar is in, because he keeps being like, are you gonna help me or not? And Vildar, like, can't hardly even respond. But while the leveler is feeding on Master Liban, Yana, you can see, is like, she's kind of having, like, she's kind of second guessing, like, is this really the right thing to be doing? Like, she's like trying to get the Herald to stop. She's like, this is enough. Like, we can see that we have power over the leveler with the rod. Like, we don't need to be like torturing this person. But the Herald, he doesn't care. He hates the Jedi so much that, like, he's able to witness this and, like, not feel any remorse, unlike Yana. And this does make sense for Yana because in previous books from Phase 2, we have seen that Yana never really was fully in the beliefs of the path. She really just joined the path because it was like a safe place for her to go. And in Path of Vengeance, we see that she is questioning those beliefs after she loses her girlfriend. So it makes sense that Yana's kind of like having doubts about, like, how useful is what we're doing right now, and, like, is this really the right thing to be doing? Then the Herald does find out that Vildar and Tay are watching them, and they end up having a fight. And during the fight, it's really Tay versus everybody else. Vildar is still completely unable to do anything because he's just consumed, like, emotionally, not literally, unlike Master Liban. He's very, like, caught up in the fact that the leveler's there, it's causing hallucinations, it's causing him to, like, have issues, so he's just dealing with that while Tay is actually fighting everybody. And Tay's having a hard time keeping everybody off of him, even though he's a good fighter, just because he's outnumbered. And he actually grabs one of the nearby relics that's in the vault, and it's a glove that he puts on. Puts the glove on, his eyes are glowing, it's like pink lightning is coming out, it's like throwing the people off of him. It's like a very, very powerful artifact that he has just so happened to pick up. And right around this time, I guess because of Tay using the artifact and, like, the shock waves that it's sending out with the lightning and all that, it does get Vildar to kind of, like, snap out of the hallucinations. And he's like, wait, Tay, like, stop. That's a dark side artifact. Like, you don't want to use that. Apparently, Vildar recognizes where they are now, and he recognizes some of the other artifacts in this room as, like, everything being dark side artifacts in this room. So that's how he's able to know, like, that this artifact shouldn't be used, because he's able to feel the presence of the dark side here. But it's a good thing that Tay was using the glove, because the only thing that's able to prevent the leveler from eating Vildar once the Herald learns that Vildar is there is that Tay gets in between the leveler and Vildar and uses the glove's power to, like, get the leveler, like, to push the leveler back. And it does seem to wound the leveler. So this is, like, one of the few things that can actually be done to, like, get any sort of, like, power over the leveler. And that's, like, one issue that we've seen throughout the High Republic is this creature is so powerful that it's very difficult to overcome. And so this is one way that they do manage to kind of at least, like, get the creature back. But after Tay hurts the leveler, Yana shoots Tay, and Tay is now wounded on the ground, unconscious. And this really upsets Vildar, not only because his friend is potentially dead, but because he feels like the Force, like, abandoned him in that moment, because the leveler came and he, like, had no access to the Force in that moment, and because of that, it's possibly cost Tay his life. And so this really upsets Vildar, and he's actually kind of like doubting the Force right now. And so he actually takes the glove and puts it on himself, and he's now about to start using the glove. And that's kind of like the cliffhanger that this issue ends on, is it looks like Vildar is getting ready to use the glove against somebody. And in issue 10, which is called Lure of the Dark Side, Tay does wake up after being unconscious for a few minutes, and he wakes up to Vildar using the glove, which is a Sith gauntlet called the Hand of Siberius. He's using it against the Herald. So there's like the pink lightning going out of the glove. Vildar is like very overcome with the dark side as he's using it, and the Herald is using Master Liban's lightsabers to deflect the lightning. And when Tay wakes up, he then has to fight some like the other remaining path members. And when that's happening, then the leveler also attacks him. So Tay is once again having a hard time fending everybody off of him. There's one time when Yana attacks him using the rod. Tay gets the rod from her. And then once the leveler attacks him, then Yana gets the rod back. So it's just kind of a big mess going on in the vault right now. But the only reason that Yana leaves Tay alone is because Yana gets a comm from Marta saying that they're gonna kill us, like come help and bring the leveler. So Yana and the other path member, they actually leave the Herald behind. And once Yana and the other path member and the leveler all leave, Tay has to talk Vildar out of like becoming fully overcome by the dark side while he's using the gauntlet. And Vildar, when he's fighting the Herald, he does come close to like, I mean, I've talked before about how Vildar, like leading up to this point, he has like done some things that kind of go against the Jedi way. Like he allows his emotions to overtake him, and he makes rash decisions that are based on anger and fear. And this is another instance where he comes close to doing that. When he has the glove on and he now has the upper hand on the Herald, and the Herald is defenseless because Yana and the leveler, they're gone. So it's just the Herald by himself. And Vildar is like coming close to like, he wants to kill the Herald, and he's being very like overcome by his anger. But fortunately, before he actually goes through and does that, that's the moment when Tay steps in and is like, I know you, this is not what you actually deep down want to do. Like, this isn't who you are. Like, stop what you're doing. And he is able to talk sense into Vildar in that moment. And Vildar is able to avoid doing like irreversible damage, not only to like killing the Herald, but also like damage to himself by going down that road. And so Vildar, now that the Herald's there and the Herald can't do anything to them anymore, Vildar ends up taking the Herald, and that's how the Herald ends up in prison when we get to the beginning of Path of Vengeance. And Vildar and the Herald show up back at the city where Maddie and the others are. They were at Enlightenment fighting off the rioters, and there is like destruction all around them. The city has been completely destroyed. And when the Herald shows up with being led there by Vildar, the Herald starts yelling and starts trying to, like, once again, as he was doing back at the beginning of this series, he starts trying to get everybody that's standing amongst the destruction of the city. He's trying to get them all mad at the Jedi again. And he's like, just so you know, the Jedi have like a secret vault of all of these artifacts, and that's where we just were. And he's just like trying to incite the people again, even though like this huge riot is like just now over. But that his plan to do that, it doesn't really work, because Vildar is able to tell them the truth, which is that Master Liban was murdered. He murdered her using the rod, and Tay tells them that they were all turned against each other, so that way the artifact could be stolen. Tay even says like, the path of the open hand is behind all of this. They probably were behind like the stuff that we've already had stolen from us previously. So the people, even though the Herald is like trying to start problems, it doesn't work in this case. But the thing is, something that they have not put together yet is that even though they have the rod, they know that the riot was started as a way for the path to steal the rod. They still have not put together yet that the bad feeling and the like whole getting eaten, like the Jedi crumbling into dust, all of that, they have not yet put together that it is the leveler, the actual creature itself, that is causing this. And reading this, it was like making me want to like bang my head against the wall because I'm like they both saw the leveler. They felt bad when they saw the leveler, but they're blaming the hallucinations and the fear and like all of the effects of the leveler. They're blaming it on the rod, not on the leveler. So they seem, Vildar, Tay, and Maddie, they seem to not understand that the creature itself is what's causing the problems, not the rod. So that has still like been yet to be figured out. And then what they all decide to do is that now, of course, like this huge riot has happened, so the Festival of Balance is not going to go forward as planned. But what they decide to do is to instead turn the Festival of Balance into like a rebuilding effort for everyone to come together and actually start trying to clean up the city in the aftermath of the riot. It's significant because like leading up to this point, a lot of different forest religions and just various people had been complaining about the Festival of Balance and how like it was an attempt to unite the forest religions, but it felt very like hollow and like just not really like that helpful. But in this case, because like they all have to work together to build the city, they actually are seeming to finally truly be united in a way that the Festival of Balance on its own wouldn't have been able to achieve. So because of the riot, they kind of have to come together and like help each other out in a way that they were resisting doing up until this point. And once they decide that they're going to work together to clean up the city, Vildar also decides to extend an invitation to Tay for Tay to be on the convocation. And at first, Tay is kind of like, I'm not joining the Guardians of the Wills again. And Vildar is like, I know, like, I'm not trying to get you to join them. I want you to be on the convocation as kind of like a neutral voice, as someone who isn't isn't specifically loyal to any one force group, but kind of like as a middle ground. Like he words it as like an independent voice, just someone to kind of help them all make decisions who isn't going to be acting in their own best interest or in the interest of whatever group they belong to. He's just like truly a neutral voice that they can trust in that way. And so Tay, once Vildar explains it to Tay in this way, Tay's really excited to join, and you can see that it really means a lot to him because he gives Vildar a big hug, which was sweet. And so the very last page of this comic is an image of Vildar and Tay hugging each other amidst like all the destruction from the riot and the different types of people standing around them cleaning up the city. So it was a really cool note to end this series on, because up until this point we've just been seeing destruction, people fighting, people just like not seeing eye to eye. And so it was nice for, at the end of this comic, we see that, you know, at least for at least Tay, Vildar, and Maddie, they are all able to get on the same page and kind of like have their heart in the right place. And Tay and Vildar, even though they've kind of been a little bit going head to head throughout this comic, like they help each other out, but they bicker a lot, I guess you could say. But even though they do that, you're still able to see them in this comic on like a truly like really friendly, caring, sincere note, and I really enjoyed seeing that. I will say the only thing that's kind of frustrating me is I wish that there could be like it drives me crazy that like they haven't figured out what the leveler is for. Like up until this point, the only people that really have seemed to put together the actual the fact that the feeling and the hallucinations and all of that is connected to the leveler, and they've actually put that together correctly, are Creighton's son, Yoda, and Solandra's show. And those are two, if I'm remembering correctly, I'm pretty sure that those are the only three people. And at the end of Cataclysm, we know that Creighton's son and Yoda, they were planning on trying to hide it. We don't know what Solandra was planning to do with the information. We just found out at the end of Quest for Planet X that a Path member did share some information with her. So we know that like there's a couple people that are kind of putting together the purpose of the leveler and what it's doing, but it is like not common knowledge amongst the Jedi yet. And I mean, we know that by the time we get to phase 1, it still isn't common knowledge. So I guess like if Creighton Sun and Yoda were planning to bury it, I guess they probably succeed, just kind of thinking ahead in that way. Yeah, in this comic, I was kind of surprised that nobody, we kind of ended this series with none of them having any sort of sense of what the leveler does. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because they've got to figure it out at some point. Like, and I don't know what it's going to take for them to figure it out if having multiple close calls with the leveler, like up close and personal, isn't enough for them to figure it out. I don't know what is. So I don't know what it's going to take at this point, but I mean, obviously it's going to have to happen sometime. But I am excited to see where that goes. I'm excited to see how that's going to play out in phase 3. I'm looking forward to seeing like kind of like seeing all of the ways that phase 2 ties into phase 3. We already have like a pretty good idea of some things just because of the connections between phase 1 and phase 2 that we've been able to see, like especially the Marta Row influence and the Markion Row in like relation, that being like one of the key ones that jumps out. But we know that there's like gonna be connections, but I also anticipate that there might be some connections in phase 3 that we like haven't even seen yet. So I'm looking forward to seeing how exactly that's going to go, because I know that in phase 2 there have been some moments for me where I've been like, okay, what's the significance of this thing? And so in phase 3 I'm hoping that we get some of those answers. Overall, I really enjoyed this series. As I've said before, I'm even more excited to see how exactly it's going to tie into phase 3, so we'll just have to see where it goes. But let me know in the comments what you thought of this series, and especially just kind of what you thought about phase 2 as a whole, especially how this comic series played into the rest of the phase and how it connects to Path of Vengeance specifically. And thanks so much for watching, y'all, and I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.